Shabbat Shalom and welcome to Wisdom and Torah Ministries. I am in Tel Aviv, Israel. Happy and delighted to be in the land of Israel. And we need to continue to do our Torah portions to follow through the commitment that I promised you. And I want to thank all of you for continuing support in the website and you writing me emails letting me know how much you're enjoying the teachings. Okay, now we're going to go right away into the parasha. The Torah portion is called Tordot. And it's chapters 25 verse 19 to chapter 28 verse 9. Okay, now, we're going to do the blessing before we continue here, and it is customary to recite a blessing before and after to thank the Creator of heaven and earth for the privilege to give us His heart and to learn from Him. Now, it says like this, Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedishanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok v'divrei Torah. Now, this is a little different prayer that I usually do, and when I'm at home, I usually have a little Torah scroll in my office. So therefore, that's why I do the regular prayer when there's a Torah scroll. When there's not a Torah scroll, I do this one in regards to the study of the Torah. Let's continue now on our search of the Torah portion, Tordot. We've been talking about the continuing understanding of Abraham's and Isaac's life. Now, this Torah portion is significant because right off the get-go, after last week's Torah portion, which happens to be Chaye Sarah, which we talked about when Sarah, when Eliezer was looking for a bride for Isaac, it's all a type and shadow of the Messiah. Now, this week, it moves directly into the generations of Abraham, after it mentions the generations of Ishmael at the end of the Torah portion, Chaye Sarah, which is the life of Sarah, in chapter 25. So if we go to chapter 25, Verse 18. Verse 19 says, this is the genealogy of Isaac, or the Tordot, the generations of Isaac. And it says, Abraham's son. Abraham begot Isaac. Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah as wife, the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian, of Paddan Aram, the sister of Laban of the Syrian. Now Isaac pleaded with the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and Yahweh granted his plea, and Rebekah his wife conceived. Now, right off the get-go, what do we see here? We see a type and shadow of the Messiah. Now let's go back to how do we find Yeshua in the Torah? How do we find Yeshua in the Torah? Now remember that Isaac is a type and shadow of the Messiah. Let's review a little bit on the last week's Torah portion. On the previous two Torah portions, you have Abraham taking Isaac to the altar. There the rabbis even agree and believe, they have the thought that Isaac probably died and resurrected, which is a type and shadow of the Messiah. Even though he didn't, the Bible doesn't tell us he did resurrect it. But it's interesting that the rabbis do believe that there was a resurrection, that he actually died and resurrected, which is a type and shadow of Mashiach to come. Then you notice that Isaac is out of the picture, and he does not appear again until chapter 24, when Eliezer brings a bride to him, which I already explained what it's all about in regards to the Messiah. Now, here, what we see is a type and shadow of the end of times, the first coming of Messiah and the second coming of Messiah. For the 40th year, he took a bride. He was 40 years old. Remember, he was 30 years old when he was put on, 37 years old when he was put on the altar, and he was 40 years old when he became when he got married to Rebekah here. So there was a period of 3 years there that he was waiting for his bride. It says that Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah as wife. Now, think about this for a minute. Yeshua came in at the end of the 4,000 years. He was born at the end of 4,000 years. Why? Because in Revelation, the parasha Bereshit, Genesis, you notice that the stars, the moon, and the sun were created on the fourth day. Well, we know that the prophets, the kings, and the judges came in the picture at the end, and Messiah came in the picture in the 4,000 year from creation. See? So now Yeshua came at the end of 4,000 years. So therefore now, here he is, coming to regather his children again, to retake his bride Israel, so that he can die and resurrect and take her as a new man. And then, later on, you see that she's barren. In other words, there's no mention of Israel. Israel went into the dispersion for 2,000 years. So this is a type and shadow of the dispersion of Israel, the regathering of Israel by the death, burial, and resurrection of the Messiah. And then you have the 2,000-year gap. 2,000-year gap has been prophesied already in the Torah portion, Tordot, in the life of Isaac. Remember, Isaac only had one bride. Okay? He only had one bride, which was Rebekah. He never took a second wife. Okay? Isaac, even though he is the oldest of all the patriarchs, there's only maybe 2 or 3 chapters that talk about him. His life is basically, there's no big events other than going down to Abimelech's when there was famine in the land, or when there was the blessing between Esau and Jacob. That's about it. Other than that, you don't hear anything about Isaac in the Bible. It's specifically about his life. You hear everything about Abraham, you hear everything about Jacob and the children of Israel, but about Isaac, you hardly ever hear anything. He lived a life of peace. He lived a life of non-issues, other than his 2 kids, that basically one that were twins, and one of them was for righteousness, and the other one was for wickedness. So therefore now we have to understand, as we study the Torah, that how to look into these prophetic pictures for the future. It's very important, because then we get a greater understanding of how to find the Messiah in the Torah. So here we see in verse 18, in verse 20, that he was 40 years old. When he was 40 years old, when he took a bride, and then later on in the chapter, it tells you that he was 60. When he was 40 years old, let me continue reading so you see where I'm going with this. Verse 21, now Isaac pleaded with Yahweh for his wife, because she was barren, and the Lord granted his plea, and Rebekah his wife conceived. But the children struggled together within her, and she said, it is well, why am I this way? And she went and inquired of the Lord. And the Lord said to her, 2 nations, listen to this, 2 nations are in your womb. 2 people shall be separated from your body. 1 people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. You know, many people worry about the Muslims in the world right now. How the Muslims, they are 1.7 billion strong. It's the fastest religion that has grown all over the world. And basically, they do things the opposite of Israel. Israel teaches their children to live and to love their neighbor. Islam teaches their children to kill and to hate their neighbor. You see? So we see a discrepancy here about the 2 origins of these 2 people. Now remember that in the genealogy of Isaac and in the genealogy of Esau, you're going to notice how Islam is combined with Esau and Ishmael and Midian. They're all connected together because their genealogies intermingle. And that's why later on we're going to see that Esau took a wife from the sons of the Canaanites and took a wife from the sons of Ishmael. Because here we see the connection of wickedness and profaning the bloodline. Another thing, who was in control of Israel in the first century? It was Esau. So now you have a struggle in the womb. You have the struggle in the womb of Esau trying to beat Jacob. Jacob is the type and shadow of the Messiah. So of Israel and the Messiah. So as we continue seeing the story, this particular story here is all about the Great Tribulation, Jacob's trouble. Now, the Great Tribulation is not 7 years. The Great Tribulation is 3.5 years. Now, then you have the birth pains of the Messiah. Why do you get that? Because of the story of Rebekah. Now, the rabbis have a lot to say on this, but we're not really going to quote them because I want to go directly into finding the Messiah into the Torah right now. But you see, right off the get-go in chapter 25, verse 19 to verse 23, you see a type and shadow of the Messiah and how there's going to be in the latter days when he is 60 years old. Remember, this struggle has been going on for a long time, specifically for the last 2,000 years. We know, and the rabbis tell you, that Rome is Esau. And the Romans were in charge of Israel in the first century, and the Herod was an Edomite. He was a descendant of Esau, who married an Israelite woman, a Jewish woman, so he will be accepted by the people. So therefore now what we see is a mixture of the seed. Now we know that the scepter departed Judah. How do we know that Messiah came at the right time in history? How do we know this? How can we prove this? Well, we know that in the year 10, somewhere in the year 10 in the Common Era, that the penalty of capital punishment was removed from the Sanhedrin Council. Now we know that the kingdom already did not belong to Judah. And there's a prophecy in Genesis that says that the scepter should not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from his feet until Shiloh comes. Now we know that can be also applied to the story of Solomon, when the Shilonite prophet came and talked to Jeroboam and the kingdom was divided. But it's a twofold prophecy in regards to the division of the kingdom in the time of Solomon, after he died, and then also in the time of Messiah. So how do I know Yeshua is Messiah? For me, because Herod was the king of Israel and he was an Edomite. And the capital punishment was taken away from the Sanhedrin council, and it was given to the Roman people, to the Roman Pilate and those people, the council, the procurator. So therefore, we see here that the penalty, the capital punishment was taken away, and this is why Yeshua was taken to Pilate, because in order for him to be killed, he needed to go to Pilate first, not to the Sanhedrin council. They only went to the Sanhedrin council after Pilate told them that he found them innocent, that you should do whatever you want with them. See, so this is very significant, because prophetically we see in Bereshit, in the book of Genesis, we see the type and shadow of what would happen later on. In the life of Isaac, it's all about the Messiah. In the children of Isaac is the struggle of the people of Israel, how they will come into that battle in the womb. In other words, the issues that we have in the world between Islam and Israel is not a new issue. It's already been prophesied for us all the way from Genesis 25. And then the fulfillment will come in Genesis 32. We're going to cover that in the next few weeks. So this is very important that we make these connections. Because as we go along, then you're going to start seeing unfolding the prophetic picture of the Messiah in the life of Joseph. So you have Abraham. He's given the role of teaching the world about the commandments of Yah. Okay. Then you have Isaac, the promised seed. Out of that will come the Messiah. Then Isaac has two children, Jacob and Esau. And one is righteous and one is wicked. And then out of that will come the struggle of how the unification of the 12 tribes is always going to be infiltrated by Esau, by the spirit of Esau. By the way, I remind you that Amalek is a descendant of Esau. So if you want to know more about Amalek, you should go to my teachings. I go, who is Amalek? I talk all about him and how Islam are descendants of Esau, Amalek, also Eliphaz, which is the son of Esau, and also Midian, also Ishmael. They're all connected through bloodline also. They're all intermingled. Okay, so therefore, this is significant for us as believers of the Messiah to make a distinction between one and the other, the two seeds, the seed of Satan and the seed of promise. Alright, verse 24. So, now I want to go back over the prophecy again in regards to the two nations in the womb of Rebekah. Okay, it says, and Yahweh said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, 2 people shall be separated from your body, 1 people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. Okay, now 1 people shall be stronger than the other, but it doesn't tell you which one. Is it going to be Israel, or is it going to be, Esau? But the next verse tells you who. The younger shall serve the older shall serve the younger. So we know that the older is going to be stronger, but the younger is going to be powerful. Okay? And this is why you have 1.6 billion Muslims in the world, and they cannot beat 6 million Jews in the world right now. Because of the promise that Yahweh gave his people through Rebekah, who says that the younger will be stronger than the older. Okay, and that the older will serve the younger. So here we have this, here we have the whole shifting of power. This is why all the battles of Israel, they're unwinnable in regards to any kind of general will look at the battle plans for Israel against the Muslims, and they should be unwinnable. But yet we keep winning all the time because of the covenant that Abraham made with Yahweh. Yahweh made with Abraham, and then how it's been fulfilled in the life of Israel. This is very powerful. This to me is very significant. Like today, I'm standing in the land of Israel. I am here in Tel Aviv. 120 years ago, this was sand dunes. Now this has been populated, one of the biggest cities in Israel. How can this be? When we are completely surrounded by Muslims. And we are infiltrated within us. There are Muslim people who want to kill us. Because the prophecies tells us that we will succeed. That we will be the leaders of the older brother. They will serve us. And that is happening right now in the land. Let's continue. Verse 24. So when her days were fulfilled for her to give birth, indeed there were twins in her womb. And the first came out red. He was a hairy garment all over, so they call his name Esau. After his brother came out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel, and so his name was called Jacob, and Isaac was 60 years old when he bore them. Now that's very, very, very important verses. Why? Because Bill Cloud has a very, very interesting teaching on this, and I hope you go and get it. Go to his website, Shorshim Ministries, and please get this teaching. It has to do about, he believes, and I agree with him, that when Jacob was trying to grab the heel of Esau, he wasn't really trying to grab it. He was trying to basically protect his head from getting hit by the heel of Esau. Because if we believe that he is the seed of the serpent, then you know that Genesis talks about that there's going to be a prophecy in regards to the Messiah. So therefore, we see here in verse 26 that after they're born, and now this is very significant because the rabbis understood when they read this. The rabbis even know. In this book that I'm holding in my hand right now, this book right now is called the Bereshit. It's a commentary on the book of Genesis. You can get this in Art Scroll Tanakh series. Okay, and basically is the book of Genesis and Bereshit. And this is from Chayai, Sarah, Toldot, which some things I like and some things I don't like. I just basically eat the meat and throw away the bones. You know what I mean? So, but the rabbis tell you that whatever happened to our fathers will happen to us. So just like there was a struggle with them in the womb, which is the type and shadow of the Great Tribulation, we know that in the end times, in the 6,000 years, there will be a battle between Israel and Esau. Esau is going to kill Israel. We know this, Jacob. And this is exactly what is happening right now among us. And we are at the end of 6,000 years. So now, in the end of 4,000 years, the Messiah is born, which here, Isaac, who's the type and shadow of the Messiah, gives birth. Okay? Takes a bride. So Yeshua comes at the end of 4,000 years, and he takes his bride, and he dies and resurrects and takes her back to be his bride again. And then later on, here there are two nations born out of her. One is wicked and one is righteous. And now we see the struggle within it, struggle within the family of Israel. And then later on, at the end of 6,000 years, when the babies are born, the struggle in the womb. So this issue, this battle that is going on worldwide is nothing new. It started in the womb of Rebekah. Once people understand these principles, then you'll not be surprised why there's not going to be peace in Israel. And if there is, there will be war again. There can never be peace until the Messiah comes. There can never be peace until the Messiah comes. Okay, so when you pray for the peace of Jerusalem, you're actually praying for the Messiah to come. That's the only understanding that we have from that. So basically, that it's only going to be peace when there's a war. So here we have Jacob's trouble. It's only 2.5 years. So when you hear the expression Jacob's trouble, it's talking about what happened here in Genesis chapter 25. Verse 29. Now Jacob cooked a stew, and Esau came in from the field. And he was weary, and Esau said to Jacob, "Please feed me with the same stew, and I'm weary." Therefore his name is called Edom, red. Okay? And it says, but Jacob says, "Sell me your birthright as this day." And Esau said, "Look, I am about to die. So what profit shall this birthright be to me?" Then Jacob said, "Swear to me as in this day." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Now there's a difference between the birthright and the blessing. Here we're talking about the birthright. What's significant, what happens here, he sells his birthright. Birthright basically has to do with you have the blessing and the birthright. So that's why we have the seed through Isaac, but then even within the seed of Isaac there's a division. People forget they're actually they're twins. They're twins, but they're not like identical twins. One is reddish, he's got a lot of hair, and the other one doesn't. Okay, now let me ask you a question. Let me make the comparisons here. Jewish people would pray 3 times a day. Muslims, they used to pray 3 times a day, but they want to be more righteous, so now they pray 5 times. The Muslims, they chant their prayers just like the Hebrews chant their prayers. They have a prophet, we have a prophet. They have a rock they speak to in Medina and Mecca. We have the rock of our salvation. They have a rock they speak to. We have the rock of our salvation. The parallels are many. So you see, if you study the religions, you notice that one stems from the other. The descendants of the Muslim. By the way, not every Arab is a Muslim. Not every Edomite is a Muslim. We know that. That's the religion. But that religion existed from the beginning. It's ancient Baal worship. Okay? Let's continue. Chapter 26. We're going to move rapidly through here due to the fact that, I'm trying to cover a lot of ground in a short time. So I pray that you're enjoying this. I'm telling you, I'm having a great time teaching Torah to you guys. And I'm just overwhelmed by the amount of people that joined the blog. And thank you so much for being part of this. Chapter 26. There was famine in the land besides the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Abraham went to Abimelech, and Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines in Gerar. Then Yahweh appeared to him and said, do not go down to Egypt, dwell in the land which I shall tell you. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and your descendants I will give this land, and I will perform the oath that I swore to your father Abraham. Now you have to remember how significant those verses are. Because when you hear the word oath, that I promise, it's referring you back to Genesis 15 when Yahweh walked through the pieces in the covenant he made with Abraham. Very significant. In other words, this is an everlasting, unconditional covenant. And even though there's famine in the land. Now, notice something really particular. Isaac did exactly what his father did. There was famine in the land, but instead of going to Egypt, he went someplace else. The question is, how come he went to Abimelech and he didn't go to Egypt? Because like I mentioned before in the previous Torah portions, Isaac was a Olah offering. He was a free will offering dedicated to the Lord. If he would have left the land of Israel, he would have been considered unclean. That's why he had to stay in the land of Israel. Just like the Messiah, when he died and resurrected, he stayed in the land of Israel. He didn't go to any other land. And then he ascended unto heaven from the Mount of Olives. And the Bible says that the Messiah will come, that the Lord will come, and he will put his feet on the Mount of Olives. And we know that the one who's going to come is the Memra, the living word of Yahweh, who's going to come in the name of the Father Yahweh. Okay? Now, let's continue. Verse 3. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For you and your descendants I will give this land, and I will perform the oath that I swore to your father Abraham. And I will make your descendants multiply as the stars of heaven, and I will give your descendants all this land, and all your seed of the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Because, listen, this is a great testimony. It's amazing who's revealing himself here and the testimony that he gives them. He says, because Abraham believed. It tells you, because Abraham obeyed my voice, kept my charge, my commandments, and my Torah, my statutes, and my laws, Torahs, in the plural sense. Now the rabbis were trying to convince you that's talking about the oral law, and that's not what it says. But in this case, we have to be conscious of the fact that he's talking about the commandments of the living Elohim. He's talking about, how the Torah existed from the beginning. Now, what a testimony that the Creator of heaven and earth told Isaac that he knew, because Abraham obeyed my voice, because he obeyed. He was going to give the promises he made in that promise in Genesis 15. Now, I'm looking for something here as I'm talking to you, because I think it's significant that we find the memra in all this. So if you give me 1 second, I want to put in here the word of, in this particular Torah portion, I want to find in the Targums what it says, because I want to make sure we go in here. We want to know, because sometimes we read the scriptures, but we don't really understand what we're reading in the sense that we're not making the connections because we don't have some of the tools. So I'll try to provide people with some of the tools here so we can all, have the opportunity to grow and to see how Messiah is found all over the Torah. Okay? Now, I can't seem to find it on this one very well, and I want to move on because I don't have time to really cover all of this today. But we know that the Memra was the one who made the covenant, and it was the Memra who appeared to not only Abraham but also to appear to Abimelech. Abimelech had a conversation with the Memra. The Memra appeared to him in a dream, in a vision, just like it happened with Abraham. Remember, so it would happen here. Now, Abraham gives away his wife to Pharaoh, right? And the same thing happens with Isaac. He says, "Well, I'm afraid." But wait a minute. The Bible says that I will make your descendants multiply. I'll be with you and I'll bless you. I will give you this land. I will perform the oath. I will make you a great nation. I will give it to your descendants. He's given them promises, and yet here we have Isaac giving away his wife because he's afraid. Exactly what we all go through in our lives. When we are waiting for the promise, we are believing in the promise, we know He's faithful, and yet when things get difficult, we go running away and doing the opposite. This is something that happened to our forefathers, will happen to us. Remember? Amen. Okay, let's continue. Verse 6. And Isaac dwelt in Gerar, and the men of the place asked him about his wife, and he said, She is my sister, and he was afraid to say, She is my wife, because he thought, lest the men of this place should kill me for Rebekah, because she is beautiful to behold. Now it came to pass, when he has been there for a long time, that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked through a window and saw there was Isaac showing endearment to Rebekah his wife. Then Abimelech called Isaac and said, Quite obviously she is your wife, so how could you say she's my sister? And Isaac said to him, Because I said, lest I die on account of her. And Abimelech said, What is this that you have done to us? One of the people might soon have lain with your wife, and you will have brought guilt on us. So here is Isaac's fault. Remember that Abimelech and Abraham were in covenant. And this may be one of the reasons why Isaac was told to go to Abimelech, because of ancient covenant practices. If you are in covenant with a father, you're in covenant with a seed forever. So the father knew about this. The Creator knew about this, even though he was going to bless him, and he went to Abimelech, and these are the consequences, but he still protected him in the midst of the disobedience. He told him he would take care of him. Okay, but then go to Abimelech then. Okay? Let's continue. Chapter 26, verse 11. So Abimelech charged of his people, saying, He who touches this man and his wife shall be surely be put to death. Okay? Then Isaac sowed in the land, and reaped in the same year 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him. The man began to prosper and continued prospering until he became very prosperous. For he had possessions and flocks, possessions of herds, and great number of servants, so the Philistines envied him. Now I want you to notice a pattern. Because we are the children of promise, the Bible tells us that we will be blessed anywhere we go. If we keep the commandments, we will be blessed. Now, the children of Israel and Jewish people have been blessed everywhere they've gone. And when we go in there and they received us. Yeah, come on in. But when we begin to prosper above the people in the native land, then they became to be envious. So I want you to notice a pattern here, that whatever happened to our forefathers will happen to us. I already said that a few times. So here we see how the children of Israel, Isaac, is prosper, and a few steps are going to happen next that you have to look in your life. Everywhere you go that you're blessed, and you tell the people that you're the children of Israel, and these steps will happen to you. First, they will receive you gladly. Come on in, let me help you. And then they'll see you prosper. And then they'll envy. And then they'll kick you out. And then they'll try to kill you. And this is what happened in the Crusades. This is what happened in the Inquisitions. This is what happened in the future. It's going to happen in the future. Now, verse 14. For he had possessions of flocks, possessions of herds, and a great number of servants, so the Philistines envied him. Now the Philistines had stopped all the wells which the father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham his father, and they filled them with earth. Now, this is very peculiar, because now you see Abraham digging wells. And the people in the same area, they put dirt on top of it because they didn't want the blessing. Remember, water means life in the Middle East. Water means life. But also water is a type and shadow of the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. So here we see the same thing is happening with Isaac. Isaac digs the well of his father, and he finds water in the middle of famine. Okay? And the people, they do exactly the same thing they did to Abraham. They were envious, and they tried to stop the outpouring of the Holy Spirit, the outpouring of blessings and prosperity. This is something very significant for us to know, because this will happen. The sooner you start prospering, people will turn against us, and they will try to kill us. They will try to stop our blessing, and they don't want us to prosper. Verse 16. And Abimelech said to Isaac, Go away from us, for you are much mightier than we. You see? It happened in Egypt. They were in Egypt, they prospered, they got a great multitude. So they made them slaves. Okay? It happened with Abraham, it happened with Isaac, it happened with Jacob. It will happen to us. Something for you to consider. If you want to come into this covenant through the Messiah Yeshua, you have to know that you will encounter adversity, and you will encounter famine, and you will be tested just like Abraham and Isaac were tested. Amen? Listen, this has been a short Torah portion this week. It's a short portion. There's a lot more. Now, the last week's and next week's, we're going to be connecting every single one of them. So if you didn't get enough information out of this one, don't worry about it, because the next one's going to be full of it. And it's going to be very prophetic in regards to the restoration of the 12 tribes of Israel. And the beginning and the division of the 12 tribes is going to be already prophesied for us in the story, in the future two Torah portions, Vayetzeh and Vayishlach. In the next two Torah portions, after this one, you're going to see the whole prophetic picture of the encountering of the angel when his name is changed from Yaakov to Israel, and then the division of the kingdom in chapter 33 of Genesis, the encounter with Esau coming back from the dispersion. It's going to be exciting. We're going to see prophetically how he's going to regather and what's going to happen before the regathering of the exiles. We're going to see the war. Remember, the trouble in the womb is going to come to fruition later on in chapter 32 of Genesis. Yahweh bless you and keep you. Pray that His blessings